Hello and welcome to today's NEASC Forum presentation, Leadership Through Continued Uncertainty. We are so grateful to see so many of you joining us from all around the world. As the pandemic continues to disrupt education, the need for adaptive leadership has never been more evident. We have invited leaders from a variety of NEASC accredited schools across New England and around the world to share their experiences in supporting staff, students, and their communities in the midst of constantly fluctuating circumstances, while at the same time maintaining their own personal well-being. And now I'd like to hand it over to Allison to get things started.
Thank you, Trillium, and thank you to everyone that's joining us today. I'm so excited for this conversation. We have gathered together a panel of really talented leaders to talk to you today about some of the challenges that they've been facing over the past couple of years. I'd like to start out by having each of our panelists introduce themselves and give you a short context of the school in which they work. So let's start with Dan, and then we'll go to Marianne and Melanie.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Dan Richard. I'm the head of school at St. Raphael Academy. St. Raphael Academy is located in Pawtucket, Rhode Island, and we're a Catholic high school of approximately 500 students. Exciting news for us. We're coming up on our centennial in 2 years. An honor that I'm not so excited about is that COVID decided to rear its ugly head first at St. Raphael Academy. We're the first school in the United States that had to deal with the pandemic. I'm so excited to be part of the conference and the webinar today, and I look forward to all the things I'm going to learn from you as well.
Thank you.
I'm Marianne Moran. I am co-principal at Nipmuc Regional High School in Upton, Massachusetts in the United States. Thank you for everyone across the world that is joining us today. Nipmuc is a public high school, grades 9 through 12, just about an hour outside of our capital city of Boston. And we have approximately 650 students.
Hi, my name is Melanie Ortajuelo. I'm the director of Madrid Active School, a NEASC Accredited school located in Spain. MAS is a small international school with only 45 students. Yes, that's right, only 45. And we work currently with the preschool, primary, and middle school sections, and with an innovative child-centered approach based on active learning. I'm so happy to be here with you today in this conversation, so thank you.
Wonderful. All right, and let's have Gary, Erin, and Caitlin.
All right, good morning, everybody. I'm Gary Franklin, principal here at Northwestern Regional High School in Winsted, Connecticut in the United States. We are nestled here in the northwest corner of the state of Connecticut public schools, approximately 650 students here. We were recently recognized in 2021 as a National Blue Ribbon School, so we are honored with that recognition and really excited to have this conversation about leadership through challenging, uncertain times. And just as previously mentioned, looking forward to not only speaking about these topics, but also learning from our panelists.
Good morning. I'm Erin Mayo. I'm head of school at Fryeburg Academy in Fryeburg, Maine, which is the western portion of the state, northern New England state. We're one of the oldest high schools in the United States. This is our 230th year, and we serve 595 students in grades 9 through 12, both day and boarding. Of that total number, about 120 of our students are boarding students and the remainder are day. And I'm pleased to be with you, and thank you for parachuting in from so many different time zones.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Caitlin Murphy. I'm the head of school at English High School in Boston, part of the Boston Public Schools. We are an open enrollment high school of about 550 students, and we are the first public high school in the United States celebrating our 200th anniversary this year. And like the other panelists, just really I'm grateful for the opportunity to pause for a moment to reflect on the lessons of the last 2 years, and looking forward to hearing new ideas and sharing what's worked and what hasn't worked for us. Thank you.
Great. And Ahmed.
Yes, hello everyone. My name is Ahmed. I am the academic director at Next Generation School in Dubai. We cater to just over 1,000 students. Really excited to be here and to have this dialogue and to rethink the narrative around education, especially in these trying times.
Wonderful. All right, so we're going to jump right in. So our first question is, these last 2 years have been an unprecedented time in education. What lessons have you learned about leadership? Marianne, I'm going to start with you.
Great, thank you, everyone. So in terms of lessons, I'd say probably one of the biggest pieces is kind of our capacity to change as organizations. I think in education, and when we think about schools, we think about change sometimes coming slowly in increments. And I think we've proven to everyone in education over the course of the last 2.5 years that we're able to move. And I think it's been a challenge in schools. So whether that's from adjusting schedules, adjusting health and safety protocols, how kids move about our buildings, how we're assessing students or putting grades on report cards, all of that, how we've used technology has changed exponentially. So that's really exciting to think about if we're trying to find like highlights and peaks out of that. But I think the other part of it is understanding that our schools are so much more than just learning organizations. I think it's highlighted kind of our role as schools in our local communities and how much our students need from us. So a piece of that is that our work as leaders needs to continue forward in figuring out how to continue to support our leaders. So one of the lessons, I think, pandemic came and it was almost like we hit pause on a lot of pieces, even though we were changing a lot of things. And I think, over the course of the last year, it's been, how do we keep that forward momentum? How do we kind of take those lessons we've learned and create organizations or systems or schools that really truly get at the heart of what our students need and supporting them? One of the ways that we've done that at NIPMUC this year is framing our work under the context of understand, support, and engage, right? So our educators are working overtime to meet the needs of our learners. We know our leaders are working overtime. So how do we get back to the basics of trying to figure out who our students are? That's the understand part. What do we need to know about them? How do we support them? What do those supports look like? And then how do we truly engage them in that learning process? So we've tried to distill it down to those pieces, which is ultimately what we've wanted forever for our students, but putting it in that context and really trying to move our work forward rather than thinking pandemic is pause, really thinking about how we use this to leverage our work in schools moving forward.
Great, thank you. Gary?
Yes, thank you. So I'll just start. Marianne, you said something perfect. So just recognizing that our school is so much more than a learning organization, right? And so, throughout this pandemic, we've really, here at Northwestern focused on our continued relationships and connectedness with our students, our families, our staff, even when we were in situations where that community had to extend beyond, our walls here on campus. And so that's something that's been a focus and really a lesson learned by our administrative team. Just that importance of community and doing whatever it takes to make sure that those relationships are fostered and nurtured through these difficult times. Even if that means, delivering birthday signs to students on their birthdays when we couldn't meet in school, having class meetings on Zoom. Those types of things are critical. And, just again, talking about the importance of community. Clearly, this pandemic has fractured community to an extent. And we have, with intention, working on rebuilding the community, but you can't rebuild what isn't there. And so just the importance that community as a foundation is critical. But then also just another lesson, considering all of the stress that all of us are under, and I see all of the panelists here and everybody that's listening, just recognizing that if everything is an emergency, then nothing is an emergency. So really being able to take in information and recognizing the changes that are happening, being flexible, and really with clear thoughts, attacking the problems or the challenges as they arise, I think is an important lesson.
Great. Erin?
Thanks. I think I want to talk about something that I learned early on in the early days of the pandemic in March through May of 2020. There have been so many lessons along the lines of what my colleagues have described since then. In those early months, it became clear to me the importance of a very responsive team that met actually more than daily to begin. We put together a remote learning team, right? The first of its kind, certainly at Fryeburg Academy and probably at many of our schools. It comprised of my senior leadership team, but we added director of resident life, our education and technology integrator, one of our grade level deans. I think I'm remembering most of the constituents, and we did Zoom meetings in the morning and in the afternoon. And essentially, we were troubleshooting and we were planning, but especially that afternoon meeting was just kind of, okay, so what did we encounter today? What are you hearing that people need? What are the experiences that we were unaware of this morning that we need to kind of wrap into our outlook and our actions going forward? So that yes, it's a crisis and there are so many things happening to you and your system that are beyond your control. But the more that you're sharing information with each other and then being able to put together a plan to telegraph out to your wider community, the greater purchase you can get on the situation. It's going to keep happening to you, but you're increasingly gaining a foothold. There's no such thing as too much communication.
Thank you so much. Dan.
Perfect segue. I just want to link into what Erin just said. I think communication is one of the biggest things that we learn. And I know it's a leadership trait, but I think it really came into focus over the time of the pandemic. I know for us here at St. Raphael Academy, we started a principal blog where we did it every single day, almost all the way through the spring of 2020. I think it's really critical, as Erin said, to make certain that all your constituents know what's going on so that it can go both ways. So you can get whatever concerns and questions they may have. It's important to talk to your students, your teachers, your faculty, staff, parents, and also with this, external agencies that are out in the community. So I don't think there's enough communication that you can do to keep everybody on the same sheet of music with you. The other trait that I want to talk about is flexibility. And I know that as educators, we're pretty flexible to begin with. But what was working for you a week ago, we could use what happened in the last month before Omicron. We were kind of going along, everything was working well. And then all of a sudden, we're looking at 20, 25% of the students testing positive. What does that mean? And how do we flex to it to meet the needs of our students and our community? And I think that that's going to continue to be a challenge as we try to go back to whatever normal is going to become. I think we need to keep an open mind and be flexible and not married to any one solution or any one way of doing things, because the truth is going to change tomorrow, or it's going to change a week from now, or it may change a month from now. So those would be my two things: flexibility and communication.
Thank you. And I think, what Mary Ann said earlier about sort of, we used to think it would take 3 years to change a schedule, and we probably had 3 or 4 schedules within 1 year, over the past couple of years. So I think really that flexibility is a huge piece. Ahmed, and then Caitlin and Melanie.
Yeah, thanks, Allison. Reflecting on it, I think the two major pieces have been developing adaptability and a growth mindset. And that transformational approach that is promoted by the ACE learning framework really lends to that and has been an asset for us. And our SLT has really done a great job, of developing that growth mindset. By doing that and getting into that zone, it allows you to, challenge those cognitive biases surrounding education, that it can be taught in one way and only in one space. So this has been really a growth opportunity to rethink the narrative about how our children learn, specifically in terms of learning spaces, student engagement, and the learning perspectives.
Terrific. Thank you. Caitlin?
Thank you. I think, so many of the strategies and traits I agree with that folks have mentioned before. I think for me, thinking about the long sweep of the last 2 years, what really comes to mind is, as a sort of leadership principle, is to not be afraid to challenge existing systems and structures. And I think there was this moment, the summer of 2020, when we were sort of all waiting for someone above us to step in with a plan for how we were going to do this. And, districts didn't know what to do. None of us really knew what to do. And so I think one of the takeaways has been that, you can create something new. I think you mentioned this idea of scheduling. We created a schedule that, our IT department didn't even think was going to be possible, but we were able to do it. And, one of the ways, related to that is thinking about as a leader is, challenge what's existing and, don't be afraid to go it alone as a school, but don't go it alone as a school leader. And I think there's a way in which, as all of this sort of chaos was unfolding, you sort of want to protect your staff and protect your students. But what I found was, we convened a series of working groups over the summer to just say, what do we want to do in terms of curriculum? So we had a Marie Kondo the curriculum working group, and we had a SEL working group. And so I was astonished at the number of teachers who came out on Zoom in throughout July and August, who really wanted to have a say in what we were doing. And when we had this sort of collective sense, then it was much easier for me to go and get the resources I needed from my central office and say, this is our plan. Our whole school wants to do this. Teachers are excited about doing this. And so I think that was a really important lesson for me. And I think just echoing this piece about communication, what I have found over the last 2 years is the amount of information there is to communicate can be truly overwhelming. And that part, the biggest part of my role lately as a school leader is to be sort of the communication digestion chief. And so I take in all of the information and then figure out what do staff need to know in order to be able to move forward and do their work. And so, sort of parsing through and figuring out, as Gary said, what's an emergency and what is an emergency? What do folks need to know? What's something I can manage or I can hold on to? And what are the key pieces of information that will help us move forward without causing additional anxiety? And so I think those would be the sort of biggest takeaways for me from the last 2 years.
Thank you. Melanie, it looks like Ahmed has a comment, I think, related to that. Can we grab his comment and then we'll come back to you?
Yeah, just to add to what Caitlin mentioned, I think I've also been amazed and astonished at how the well-being piece has come to the forefront. It was on the radar, but now it's at the core of everything in our psychometrics. And, it's just been, one of the big positives that has come out of this pandemic, that we're so focused on well-being of our entire learning communities.
Thank you. Melanie?
Thank you. Okay, I think that, as my colleague said, challenging times can be learning opportunities. That's obvious, and maybe it doesn't sound very original, but the first thing that comes to my mind is that adversity can make you stronger. It was hard to be in charge of the school, particularly during the first lockdown, but I feel more mature now as a leader because I lived that. It is the kind of situation that helps you understand what is really important and to prioritize. And one lesson learned for me, particularly related to my personal leadership style, has been to learn the importance of conveying a sense of strength and confidence and to my staff, and of being assertive. But also, on the other hand, I had to learn how to accept and coexist with uncertainty and with the fact that sometimes it is okay if you don't know everything, and that being the leader does not mean having all the answers, and that is not always possible. Unfortunately, I hated that, but I had to learn to accept that also. And also about alternative plans. Working at let's say, different school in Spain, an unusual school, having a plan B is my second nature. But with the pandemic, we moved to the next level, and now we also have a plan C and a plan D. So they're continuously thinking about what are you going to do next if this doesn't work, or if something else happens, And yes, when you can't control what is happening around you, the only thing left is personal talent and the capacity to organize human resources and other resources, making the best of what you have.
Wonderful. Thank you. All right. Thanks everybody for those opening thoughts. So I wanted to kind of drill down and ask you if you could talk about one strategy that you've used to support your staff, your teachers, and the others that work with students this year. We know as leaders, that is one of your primary roles to sort of be there and to support them. And so I'd love to hear some strategies that you've used that have been helpful for staff. Does anybody want to start first?
I'll jump in.
Great.
My number one strategy is to pat them on the back and say, great job every time I have the opportunity. I like to be the number one cheerleader for all they do. And just a simple way of what we do is we try to have some type of appreciation. I know like on Friday, we're going to have lunch for everybody. Just simple ways to acknowledge all the hard work they're doing. And it's always good to motivate people and reward them. So we set up a bonus program for the fall and gave them a little bit of monetary TLC as well. So there's other ways to do it, I'm certain of, but I just spend a lot of time thanking them for all the hard work they're doing and making them know that they're special to our community.
Great. Marianne?
Yeah, I'll jump into on top of obviously doing what Dan is doing. I think the other piece that, we've learned this year is just kind of being all in, starting your day ready to sub a class or be present in the hallways or cover a lunch duty, or, I'm finding that my day-to-day work is not getting done until after the students leave for the day. Just this kind of sense that, my job looks a little differently, and where I used to be able to schedule a block of time and say, I'm going to have a meeting during this time. That's not always the case. And that's okay, because I think that's what staff needs, that, we're in this together and we're willing to help out. They've been amazing at helping out, not only in their classrooms, but in other classrooms when staff shortages and other things come up, or being more present. So I think as leaders, doing that with them is most helpful.
Great. Thank you. Caitlin?
Sure. I think just to add on, I think what Marianne's talking about in terms of modeling for staff. So if we're saying we're all going to need to do extra, I completely agree. My work day for the things that I'm supposed to technically be doing, it doesn't usually start till 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon, because I'm in the bathrooms, I'm in the hallways, I'm sort of everywhere, which students have been commenting on, which I think, besides the work-life balance challenges, has been positive in a lot of ways in terms of just feeling very visible this year. I think other things, giving staff the sort of big picture. So I think, when people understand, like, okay, so we're coming back in January, a lot of folks are going to be out. Here are the things, or here are sort of the guidelines. Here's what we're able to do. Here's what we're not able to do. I think people generally sort of step in where they see there's a space. We've made a lot of things, even in terms of class coverage. So we have a Google form where people can volunteer, so that folks who feel really able, and we have them updated every single week, so that if this week is not a great week for you, but in other weeks you're willing to cover classes, it gives the sort of sense that there's some choice. And and then there are some days where we don't have a lot of choices. But I think having had that experience, and then the sort of old-fashioned things, like sometimes I pay for food at PD, and it's not a lot. I mean, a couple of trays of cookies from Star Market goes a long way towards saying, look, I see how hard you're working, and I want to celebrate you. One last thing that I'll say that I think has been both helpful for our school-wide community and for our staff is we've been really intentional about including restorative justice circles in our school this year. And so we've added that to our advisory program every other week. And then we have incorporated staff circles. Staff have had a space both to sort of process what's happening with them and to lead this work with students. And so while that is something that we're asking staff to do with students, it's also something that they're finding is fulfilling in many ways.
Thank you. Erin, and then Gary.
Sure, thanks. I think I want to note that thinking of faculty in particular, that their emotional wellness, their sturdiness at school is very tied to their sense of how well they are serving their students, or their frustrations or concerns about not being able to meet a level of kinds of needs that they haven't encountered before. So to the degree that we as the school leaders are able to structure opportunities to hear from teachers about what those experiences are, to have them specify for us what they're seeing, as far as the new learning landscape and different kinds of individual student concerns so that we can problem solve together. That in my experience is what they most want to have a voice in.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, so just to add to that, I know many of us here on the panel have already mentioned that essentially our traditional job roles and descriptions has kind of been put on the back burner for now, and it's everybody, all hands on deck as far as really working through all of the challenges over the course of the pandemic. And our teachers have done a phenomenal job, really understanding that their students are not just the ones that are in their classroom. Everybody, they're all of our students. And so in working through situations where we've had staff shortages or what have you, just seeing how our teachers have been able to really step up and take ownership and find solutions and help us in many different ways has been appreciated, and we're doing everything we can as well to show our appreciation. But as far as just overall work with our staff, I don't want to oversimplify things, but bottom line is listening and really dedicating time to have those conversations with our teachers and even with our students if they are having a difficult time. And whatever they share, believe them, don't judge, and really look at it from the standpoint of how can you help? And really kind of that mindset of being a servant leader, and that you're not a leader of the building so that other people can do what you want and serve you. You are a leader so that you can serve others. And so just really giving that time and listening to any concerns and working on being able to solve problems that you can. Clearly, we cannot eradicate COVID. However, we can help make teachers more comfortable and students more comfortable in the building, whether it's PPE or looking at the different places in our school and utilizing the space differently. So those are just some items that I wanted to share.
Awesome. Melanie, and then Ahmed.
Thank you. I totally agree with Gary. Communication is definitely the key to support both the staff and students. And regarding the students, emotional health is one of the key elements of our school program here at Madrid Active School. So when the pandemic started, we already have many pedagogical structures and approaches that aim to provide students with emotional support practically on a daily basis. And the main strategies for emotional support that we are using right now, the first one is careful observation. Our teachers are trained in observation, which is an important tool to not only to assess students, but also to detect when a student is suffering from emotional imbalance or distress. We also include as part of the time structure in the classrooms opportunities to have small conversations with students so they can talk about their emotional state if they need it. For example, we start the school activity every morning with a brief gathering where all students can share how they feel that day, and also weekly or every other week, depending on the student's maturity. They have a tutorial with their teacher, and this is an opportunity for the teacher to check on every student's emotional development and needs. And to finish, teachers are always very open to conversations with parents, and there are specific times and channels established for parents to communicate with teachers, so the family can let us know if their child needs extra support. So that are a few of the ideas that I can share with you.
Great, thank you. Ahmed.
Yes, thanks, Allison. In terms of support, there have been two really important facets for us. The collaborative and social connection pieces have been really important. Developing a mindset that asking for help is not a sign of weakness, but a sign of strength. So it's okay to make mistakes, and developing that transparency in the learning community. The other important piece in terms of social connection has been, being empathetic and really having, as an SLT, I was just discussing this a couple of hours ago with our principal, really having your ear to the ground and really being sensitive to the needs of the different sectors of our learning community, whether it's the students, our staff, our SLT, or our principals. We set up regular counseling sessions, Zoom breakout groups in order to provide that support system, developing a support system at different levels, and that mindset and getting them to be comfortable with this process, of trial and error. That it's going to be a journey for us, and we're all in this together as a community. That has really been helpful for us as a school.
Thank you. So many good thoughts there. I mean, just that idea of supporting teachers, meeting them where they are, being present, being engaged in the school. I think just a heightened sense of sort of empathy and understanding is what I hear a lot from these school leaders. All right, I'm going to turn it over to Trillium. She has a couple of questions she's going to combine from the Q&A. I just want to remind our participants that if you have a question for the panelists, you can put it in the Q&A, and we'll try to get to as many of those as we can.
Thanks, Allison. As I'm monitoring the Q&A, I'm noticing some themes emerging from some of our participants, like Jennifer and Maria, who have both asked similar questions that they'd like to hear from you all about how you think education and learning is fundamentally changing, if you think it is, and how different modes of learning might become permanent. For an example would be online or blended learning experiences that you might have picked up along the way the last 2 years. Would anyone like to start with that question?
Ahmed looks like he's unmuted, so we can go ahead.
Yeah, Ahmed, I know you have experience in this, even though you were the last to speak on the last question. Please.
Right. I think I mentioned this earlier, just challenging those cognitive biases surrounding education. I think Caitlin mentioned this, that, rushing towards our comfort zones and just looking at, well, what's everyone doing, and trying to just, mimic that. I think that's really, it is dangerous, and it can be counterproductive to the dialogue we're having right here. And, this opportunity for change, this opportunity to, transform into the, from an ACE learning perspective, we could say the what if, box, and trying to think about, how do we, provide more opportunities for voice and choice for our students. It's okay to give them that platform instead of, focusing on, just synchronous modes of teaching and learning. Can we dive into synchronous modes and let them have the world as their school? So I think it's really important for learning communities to think outside the box and not to just mimic what everyone is doing, but rather, try to be disruptive, in this uncertain time, and try to take this as an opportunity, to really develop those student engagement pieces, those learning spaces, and that voice and choice, which is really, really important.
Can I jump in and talk a little bit of what you're saying too, Ahmed? One of my teachers came to me, it was probably the end of last year, and said, the pandemic has kind of taken our schools and like crumbled it down into the building blocks again, right? And now we have this opportunity to rebuild. So were we going to let our system rebuild the same schools and structures that we already have? Or are we going to design something new from those building blocks to create opportunities, right? We challenged time and space. We really streamlined curriculum and what we were teaching our students. So those all now create these opportunities to say, what do we want schools to be? And part of what we do at NEASC is kind of challenge through the sense of what if, right? Like, what if students were given the opportunity to not come to school every day and maybe learn from an alternative resource? What if, community partners came in and really made valuable learning experiences for our kids? So we start to challenge that. I think the moment right now, though, is that as learning organizations, we're struggling with capacity, right? Like, we're trying to meet the needs of our learners. We're trying to survive the day-to-day. So at what point do we regain enough capacity to say, we're ready to dig into the hard work, to the visioning, to the what we want us to be? Because I feel like we're still in survival mode. So those are the moments that I'm waiting for and that are really exciting before too much gets rebuilt, right? To say, what could we be? And so I'm hopeful that this spring is much healthier and that we get to a point very soon, whether it's the end of this year or over the summer, beginning of next year, where we can really dig into this idea of who we want to be. Now that we know we're capable of change at such a rate, now that we know that we're able to do some of these pieces and think about kind of what we rebuild as.
Yeah, just to add to that, Mary, also looking at ed tech, moving from being a disruptor to a key asset in this transformational journey, I think that's really important as well.
Erin, you get your hand up.
Yeah, thanks.
You go next.
So building on what Mary Ann said, I like so much the way she phrased that, the power of the what if. And that is part of waiting for that moment or recognizing that moment that we're out of the day-to-day, developing a vision. But alongside the exciting what if vision, there's also the longer term adaptation that we're all going to have to make in our program for the socialization needs, learning loss, but also just the arrested socialization that our currently, especially in high school, we're seeing it in our 9th and 10th graders, but we're going to be seeing this across all of our grades for I don't know the next 5 years, 6 years. Thinking about the kids coming up who will have endured in some form 3 of their most formative years under the conditions of pandemic learning. And so, yes, right now we're in the day-to-day of confronting that as best we can, but stepping back and doing the longer term work of mitigating it across years. That's what I'm waiting for.
Thanks, Erin. Caitlin, were you about to speak before?
Sure. I think I'm just thinking about, in terms of also this question about technology, and we were all remote and then we came back, and we did have this moment this fall where teachers had been planning lessons that were going to be sort of blended learning, and they're going to use their Chromebooks, and we won't have as much paper. But then we found that students were sort of in classrooms doing work on laptops, but together. And especially for our 9th graders, we were having those sort of socialization issues. And so I think one of the things that we've been thinking about is just how, as we start to, as Mary Ann said, like rebuild, right, with from the sort of ground up, how is that specifically tailored to the needs of our school community? And how can we be really specific and mindful that not all schools are going to need and want the same things coming out of of this, and that has to be okay. And whatever designs come out of this really have to be reflective of the needs of the students and the educators in that community, because every school is going to need something different. And we're very lucky that we now have this sort of multiple models and multiple modes of learning. But we learned that we really have to sort of interrogate each mode, that in many cases for our ninth graders, the blended learning, it wasn't working that well. Students weren't engaging with each other in the sort of rich way we wanted them to in person. And it felt very strange to say, put the computers away. Take out a piece of paper and a pencil. You're going to write with one of these, which you haven't done in a while. But I think to just, really always be open to thinking about what works for your school community is going to be different than what works for other folks.
Terrific. Thank you, Caitlin. Our Q&A is heating up. So I just one of the other topics that's coming up is the idea of learning loss and how you might be dealing with students' learning loss. And we talked also about the emotional capacity and sort of what you're seeing there. But in terms of specifically learning loss, does anyone have a strategy that they're using or ways that they're working with students to differentiate learning to help them get back to where they need to be?
You're going to have to pick on someone, Allison.
Okay, Dan. Dan, I'm going to pick on you since you haven't spoken.
Thank you. I think we can't minimize this. I think Erin talked about it already a little bit, but you're looking at maybe a year. For us as a high school, we're getting ninth graders, but I think academically and in some ways socially, they're more like eighth graders. What we've done is we brought out an outside agency to work with us in the math, because the math has been relatively weak. So that they're getting extra work on the weekends. They're getting reviews where they can go online and look at it. We had summer school for the first time, I think, in the history of the school to try and bridge the gap from 2021 to 2022. I think that we've worked with our students quite often and we'll continue to work with them with extra tutoring. But that's an issue that we're going to have to address, I think, as a community here at St. Raphael Academy, but I think throughout the country, I think we're going to address it. And I don't think there's any easy solution. I think it's going to be a protracted, long 4 or 5 year time period, as Erin kind of hinted at, that we need to come up with different ways to do it. Certainly you can do testing and find out where the holes are, but then you're going to have to come up with that plan to fill in those gaps. And that's going to be a challenge. And I don't think it's going to be something that's going to be resolved in a day or a week or a month.
Gary, yeah, I was going to call on you. Go ahead.
Yeah. So, I think that, clearly we're all going to be facing challenges as far as this is concerned. And I think one of the approaches that we have here at Northwestern is a renewed focus on our professional learning communities and the work that our teachers are doing in PLCs. And so we've been able to develop some more time during the school day for teachers to develop common formative assessments and work with their colleagues in content specific areas as far as really identifying what are the skills that are the focus areas within class, what content is necessary for our students to learn, and then how are we going to assess that, and then what is the protocol and process after the assessment to identify whether or not our learning objectives have been met, and then what do we need to do to reteach or differentiate our instruction so that we meet the needs of all of our students. So that is a very important focus area for us here at the school. We're also reevaluating our child study team and the processes involved for a student to be kind of identified despite our tier 1, 2, and 3 interventions, if there's the need to refer to special education or anything along those lines.
Great. Thank you. Marianne, did you have another thought?
Yeah, I was just going to chime in just quickly. So in Massachusetts, the state has been really intentional about their work around learning loss and not using the language of learning loss. So in Massachusetts, we call it learning acceleration, which is more about giving students what they need it versus going back and trying to fill every gap potentially exists due to the pandemic. So if a student is in a math class and you're finding they missed an important skill about positive and negative numbers at that moment, giving them the pieces they need to kind of accelerate their learning moving forward. And it's just been an interesting conversation at the state level to really kind of see it as that. How do we help kids kind of accelerate forward versus thinking about all of the pieces they've missed? And it's a wording thing, but I think it's a mindset shift too. So the state has given a lot of grant funding, to bring students in over vacations, to kind of create acceleration models where, you can give kids kind of the extra support they need.
Great, thank you. Any other, Caitlin, was that you were going to say?
I think one thing, we've sort of been living this concept for years as a turnaround school, having students who have had interrupted learning coming to us, or students who have been socially promoted from middle school. And so some of the work that Marianne's talking about, just in terms of identifying power standards, especially in math, right? So a student comes and you realize quickly that they missed all of fractions. So we're not going to teach all of fractions. We're going to teach the pieces of fractions that you might need in that moment to do that problem. And there's been a lot of research that supports approaching in that way. But one of the things that we've been doing this year is going back to Zaretta Hammond's work around how the brain actually processes information. And, a number of our staff members, we had read Culturally Responsive Teaching in the Brain years ago, and then bringing it back and saying, wait a minute, how are you actually structuring your lessons? Because teachers are feeling this pressure about, I need to get through all of these things. And so there's this danger that you can be overloading. And what we know about how the brain processes information is that is going to get you not at all what you want. And so that's been a really critical sort of mentor text for us to go back to as a school community, to think about how do you create spaces, how do you ensure that you're being that warm demander, and how do you structure your lessons so that students actually have processing time, because some of the breadth that we've done in the past is going to have to be reduced to get students, what are the core skills that they need in each content area. So that's been very helpful for teachers in my building.
Great, thank you. We have about 10 minutes left. This time always goes so quickly. I just have maybe two more questions. There's a couple of questions in the chat sort of talking about the idea of developing a growth mindset with your faculty, and also ensuring an environment of psychologically safe and trust-based learning. And I think those kind of go together. I wonder if anybody could speak about ways within their building that they try to build a growth mindset, or this idea of, how do you make the environment safe for teachers and for students in order to take risks, in order for people to try new things, in order to have that growth mindset. Melanie, do you have any thoughts on that? I think you're muted.
Okay, yes. Okay, thank you. Well, regarding taking risks, I think the most important thing is to create a non-judgmental atmosphere within your faculty team. So they can, teachers really feel free to express new ideas or to try new things. And there is also a lot about conveying confidence. It's important to provide teachers with feedback, but I think it's fundamental to include always something positive in this feedback, so they can build in this confidence. Because I think that to be able to grow, I think you need to believe in your own capacity to do it. And you need to believe that you have something valuable to offer. So I try to work a lot with this aspect of my teachers' development, about self-confidence and also about autonomy, to encourage them. And I tell them it's okay to try, and it's okay also to make mistakes. Because this is how you learn, making mistakes. So yeah, we can accept that. I don't expect you to be perfect. That is the message that I want to convey to my teachers, and we do that through weekly meetings. And I also have a term meeting, an individual meeting with each of my teachers, so I can talk to them about their individual professional development. Mm-hmm. So this is what we do at our school. I think that's useful.
That's great. Thank you so much. I love that. Just expressing confidence and letting them know that if they don't do it right the first time, it's okay. And that is part of the growth mindset, right? And any other thoughts on that? Dan, yeah.
I'll be very brief. I think you have to have, and Gary talked about it already, you have to have a trust factor and a trust environment between your administration and your teachers. If you have that, then you got most of the situation resolved. There's going to be issues, but the teachers need to know that you have their back and that you're going to support them if they're doing everything within their abilities to instruct.
Thank you. One more. Anybody else?
Can I jump out?
Sure. Go ahead, Marianne, and then we'll go Gary.
So I would say two things. So we've been working on a lot about the potential in education at NEASC over the course of the last 4 to 5 years. So we actually have a protocol that we developed. We go through, we call it the what if game, where you bring your faculty together, they sit in small groups and they go around and they brainstorm kind of their big ideas and their curiosity. So they go around and everyone shares a what if. You're not allowed to skip people, right? So you start to tap into this sense of like, what have they been thinking about? What's in the background? What are their ideas? And then to pick a what if idea and really try and action step it out to talk about how do we bring that to reality. So what if is a mindset at NEASC that we embrace. We often get teachers that pop out into the hallway and say, hey, what if? And will throw something at us. And our job is just to say, go for it. And they know that they can fail. I think the other piece of this puzzle is like starting this year in September at our first faculty meeting, we tapped into the idea of bold ideas, right? So coming into the pandemic, new year, like what are we going to do? So we had our faculty define what they considered to be a bold idea. Then they share their bold ideas, and then many of them adopted that as their goal for the year. So I think creating opportunities for faculty members to share those ideas that they may not feel safe sharing, but once they get more used to sharing, gets to be a really exciting piece of kind of all those ideas that they think about driving into work or going home from work or, you know, just dream about, and trying to kind of remove the barriers to help them make that a reality. And I think naturally with that comes the growth mindset, because we say, you know, you're going to fail. Not every idea is a fantastic idea. They know that. But the more that we can support them trying those creative ideas, I think it fosters this idea that anything goes and we'll try anything once.
Great. We're going to have Gary and Ahmed. And then just to let you know, I'm going to ask all of you to share one personal strategy that you use for your own well-being to end the webinar. So Gary, and then we'll have Ahmed.
All right. Yeah. So I was just going to just touch base on the growth mindset and how we really want to see that as far as our work between teachers and students. But in order for this to really be authentic, it's important for for everybody to be able to see that administrator to teacher. And so it really gets down to the teacher evaluation process and recognizing that it isn't an I gotcha. There is no intention as far as micromanaging talented educators, but rather as professional educators being able to work together and talk about the teaching and learning that's going on in the classroom and encourage taking risks.
Thank you. Ahmed?
Yeah, I think it's really important to foster, when it comes to growth mindset, it's really important to foster the idea that it's okay to make mistakes. And I think just to add to what Dan mentioned about that trust piece, in connection to the growth mindset and the fact that it's okay to make mistakes, that ongoing process of reflection and feedback, really building a strong system of communication that would allow us to learn from those mistakes and to really reflect on the journey, just not, going through the processes, but really go, as a team and as a learning community, taking a step back to really look at, what's working, where we were, where we are, and where we're going. I think there's a lot of value in that. And there are a lot of gems that can come out of that process.
Thank you. I mean, it's been such a rich conversation. So I just want to end by asking each of you, we had this question, where do you find the personal reserve to do your job when so much is demanded of you? And it's clear that all of you are, dedicated school leaders who are putting so much of yourself and your heart into your job. So let's just really quickly, can you just share one strategy with our friends out there who are watching? What's one thing that you do to keep yourself grounded or to keep your parachute going so that you can help other people? Dan, why don't we start with you, and then Melanie and Marianne.
Allison, thank you for that segue. I'll link it to what I did for my previous job. So just first off, I work out routinely, but I think a lot of people are going to say something like that. So I'm going to go a little bit deeper dive. I was an Air Force fighter pilot. So I'm used to getting the mission done. And I always steal the adage that the Navy SEALs have, which is the only easy day was yesterday. So if you go in with that mindset that we have a mission to do, and that's that time when the rubber meets the road, you need to get the mission done. And if you go from the perspective that that's, we're the focal point of the building, and what, if we're not the ones holding up the barrier, I'm not sure who's going to be doing it. So I always go back to what the Navy SEALs said, which is, if you want an easy day, look what happened yesterday, because you don't know what today is going to be, but your job is to make it happen.
Thank you. Melanie?
Okay, I try to dedicate time at least on a weekly basis for self-reflection and self-awareness. So I schedule in my own agenda that time to make sure that I remember. And it's amazing because sometimes just a few minutes break can be enough to realize when something is not going well from an emotional point of view. So I try to remember to ask myself, how am I feeling? How am I doing with this situation? And to take care of myself and keep connected to my own needs. As I said, from a very practical point of view, scheduling me time in my professional agenda.
Thank you. Marianne, and then Caitlin and Erin.
Yeah, I would say staying connected to my own why, why I'm in this job. I think the last couple of years have been especially challenging, but I think we're all in this job, not as a job, but for the greater good, right? We're committed to our communities, we're committed to the students, we're committed to the staff, and we're all in. And so kind of giving it that and, taking it day to day, but I would say not taking myself too seriously either, finding times to laugh with colleagues and, make work a fun and enjoyable place.
Caitlin?
I do want to just say it is really, really hard. The last 2 years have been really hard. And I think that how hard they've been on school leaders has been something that has been missed a little bit. And that part of it is just acknowledging that it has been very, very hard for all of us. And so, I think having other school leaders, this is a very lonely job. And having other school leader friends or people you can reach out to is really important. And I think it's something that many of us don't do well, is taking care of ourselves. But I think I would echo what Marianne said. Sometimes there's a couple of classrooms that I'll go and just sit in for a little while to remember why I'm doing this. And because if you're clearing the bathrooms and trying to figure out lunch duty, and there's a parent who's upset and a student crisis, sometimes you can forget, most of us started out as teachers and why we love education so much. So I think it's finding those moments of joy in the day that as a principal, you're less likely to encounter.
Wonderful. Thank you. Erin, and then Gary.
So I suggest this concrete tactic. We work very long days, all of us. And when you go home, that should be your time. That should be your personal time that's satisfying and rich with your family. And I just don't think, and there are going to be varying levels of comfort with thinking about this, but I just don't think there's any reason to be on email after you go home at 5:30 or 6 or 6:30 or the later evenings that we all have. Leave the day behind. Make sure everybody who needs to contact you in an emergency knows that they do that via text or via phone. You're not going to have a satisfying evening. And in fact, you will probably harpoon many an evening by getting back on email and seeing that angry shot that could have waited until tomorrow morning from whatever parent or what have you. So I suggest that that's pretty important for us.
Great. Thank you. Gary, I was going to have, Ahmed, I'm giving you the last word. So Gary and then Ahmed.
Yeah, so I would just share, the best strategy for me to kind of push the reset button is to take a step away from the heavy work. the really difficult work that is going to be there forever, and go and take a lap throughout the school and remind yourself of all of the great things that are going on, even though you are still engaged in that heavy work. So looking into classrooms, seeing the teaching and learning, interacting with kids, building those positive relationships, that's a good reset button.
And Ahmed.
Thank you, Allison. I think the three key words for me are resilience, grit, and sacrifice. So we got into these leadership roles to make a difference. And there was something really powerful that one of our SLT mentioned. He mentioned that as tough as it is, it's not about us, it's about the learning community. So there's no chance to break down. But I really, really like, and I plan to implement what Erin mentioned. It's so important to compartmentalize and, have different silos for in your day. That family piece is so important for you to rejuvenate and be back out there, to climb that mountain on the next day. So that is one takeaway that I will leave with to implement in my own experience. But in terms of the learning community, for us, it's really important that sacrifice piece is always, there. And these type of forums are really helpful, when you connect with colleagues and have these discussions, they're really rejuvenating and a support piece for all of us.
Terrific. Thank you so much. And thanks to all of you for all of your wonderful thoughts and comments. I'm going to turn it back over to Trillium to close up for us.
Great. Thanks, Allison. Yeah, we would definitely like to thank all of you panelists for your insights and all of the people who have joined us from around the world. As you said, leadership can be lonely, and we hope that this forum creates a space where you can feel a part of a global community of leaders. So on behalf of our panelists and everyone at NEASC and my colleague, Allison, we thank you again for joining us today, and we hope to see you soon. Take care and be safe.